Japan 2020, Ainu, Ryukyu, and a collection of textiles that will make Japan come to the forefront of a different. Our goal is to have 1,000 channel subscribers. If you like, please register for the channel. I am immersed in Japanese culture. What a wonderful time. But where should I start? Many people are interested in sports in this fascinating country as the Rugby World Cup is coming to an end and the upcoming Olympics in Tokyo next year.
On the BBC travel program, Japan with Sue Perkins, a guide, Sue Perkins, visited bars and watched sumo afterwards. According to the program, traditional sumo rituals offer a glimpse of Japanese culture. A similar glimpse of Japanese culture is the recent release of Textiles of Japan, the Thomas Marie Collection Japanese Textiles, Thomas Marie Collection. It's a chart that, for those who don't know Japanese textiles, this 4-kilogram total weight graph will not only strengthen their arms, but also re-evaluate the art of textiles. It contains not luxurious silk or brocade fabrics decorated with Edo castle or no theater, but textiles created by another Japan but still forming the core of Japanese culture. It is the world of ordinary people, peasants, hunters and ethnic minorities with ancient roots.
Thomas Marie's interest in Asian islands stems from his Irish and sailor uncle Thomas Kilkenny's story of yeating habits and head hunting. In the 1960s, Marie openly acknowledged her interest in shamanism and her hippie culture and drugs. Influenced by, he began collecting Indonesian textiles and sculptures. I first met Japanese textiles in 1982 when I was asked to exhibit my collection at an exhibition on shamanism. I didn't sell a single collection. Even now, this is a hobby in Europe. But since we are Japanese, we have our own preferences. Eko Iwanaga, the head of the museum in Fukuoka, wrote in the introduction of the graphics, Mr. Thomas Marie worked hard to find things like this and the essence of Japanese aesthetics.
We realized that small gaps in fabrics and clothing could give us a very broad sense of society as a whole, Marie said. I wrote this book on two sides of my brain. They are strictly academic, intuitive and love for textiles. All I can guarantee is that this book can strengthen the upper body. Marie's collection of textiles was purchased at a private price at the Minneapolis Museum in March.
Preserve the arts of the common people. Among the Japanese textiles, Marie focuses on the work of the Ainu people of Hokkaido and the colorful fabric called the red-colored bottle of Okinawa, which was another country called the Ryukyu Kingdom until it was annexed to Japan in 1879. Being overwhelmed by the longing of the indigenous peoples for art and local society, and natural materials that are not yet culturally imbued with other cultures, he followed the folk art movement and began collecting folk crafts. A folk art movement is an activity to discover beauty in traditional folk crafts and everyday goods of the common people, which began in the late Taisho era. The Japanese Folk Art Museum, built in 1936 by Yanabe Money-Oji, was now home to 17,000 items. Masumoto Kumi, a U.S. art dealer, said, "There is an image that crafts are poor and unrefined, but Japanese folk crafts are being evaluated for their sophisticated standards in many fields." From the 18th to the mid-20th centuries, Ainu clothing was made from plants like nettles and hemp, elm bark and salmon skin. Ainu, who has been left out of Japanese society mainly for hunting and gathering, has transformed these basic materials into fabrics comparable to gold. In fact, Ainu clothing is now quite expensive. And the Ainu was strange and expensive. Softer than the nettle. He made a ceremonial dress with a great applique. Many of these dresses remain in great condition because they can only be worn in rituals such as sacrificing bears.
On the other hand, Okinawan textiles are more similar to Japanese aesthetics than those of Ainu. Red patterns use anti-dyeing, non-dyeing techniques, and techniques from Indonesia, China and India, which have a history dating back to the 14th century. The dyeing pattern is inspired by nature such as flowers, fish, trees and water. In addition, the design was strictly determined so that the class of the wearer could be seen at a glance. Bright designs were used only in the high class, and ordinary people wore simple and dark designs dyed in indigo and black. The aristocrats were allowed 2-week pre-dyed yarn. Daniel Schaefer, the chief editor of Harry Publications who published Marie's book, says Ainu's fabrics are expensive, and Okinawan's great red figures don't appear on the market. Meanwhile, Schaefer is surprised at the book's success. It has become our most successful book, and we have a second edition
Instead
already.
of the elegant garments of courts and aristocrats, the common motif of clothing and textiles created in the community is used. It is a design that evokes strong luck, wealth, happiness, or evil. In Ainu's clothing, the design of animals probably derived from Scythia and Siberia was considered to be a force of protection. Anna Jackson, director of Asian art at the Victoria and Albert Museum in Britain, explained in the introduction of the book, some of these fabrics are indivisible from spiritual belief. Signs of good luck and designs of animals and plants appear in other fabrics owned by Murray. They include haori, bedding, and a fire extinguishing robe. Until today, these motifs have been used in Japanese textiles, and their precision and artistry are appreciated. But this is what makes up a part of the theme of the story that Japanese artists take up. Many of the stories are touching. Ben Evans, editor-in-chief of the Hollywood Publications, said, "The seasons change, love and cultural events are all popular themes, but they are blended with mysterious ideas about nature and the transition of life." In a society that is very closed and heavily tied to honor and class relationships, there is a fabric that transcends these boundaries.
Indigo dye. Let's talk about dyeing, which plays a big role in the secret of Japan's great textile art. Yellow, taupe, blue-colored colors are used, but among them, the indigo dyeing is an unusually monopolizing market. This is because of the isolation policy between 1630s and 1853. So far, indigo-dyed fabrics have existed all over Japan's culture, and as historical data, countless prints can be covered. Jackson of the Vienna Museum of Art, Incorporated mentioned the works of Wakagawa Hiroshi and other artists, who pointed out that these artists were very interested in clothing and fabrics. Japanese textiles have a long tradition and are full of vitality. For example, Chihiro, an old shop in Kyoto, which was founded in 1555, is still making kimonos. On the other hand, as clothing began to spread in the late 1800s, kimono became clothing at special times. Traditional Japanese clothing has been at risk for years as a result of the strong roots of modern Western clothing, Masumoto says. This is especially true of Ainu, who have been repressed and alienated just like Native Americans. The Japanese government did not recognize Ainu as an indigenous until 2008. Then, in 2020, the National Ainu Museum will be established in Hokkaido. This is part of the Ainu restoration movement, including the restoration of traditional patterns of hand clothes worn at special ceremonies, Murray said.
Traditional dyeing techniques are also being reproduced. In Japan House, London, England, at the beginning of this year, you know what? An exhibition on attackings are a combination of colors of kimono, which were once used by privileged classes to express their rank, liking and growing up well. In Kyoto, Yoshimasa has been used to dye plants from generation to generation, and it is reproducing old-fashioned techniques from historical materials and samples of cloth. The Vienna Museum in London will also exhibit its kimonos in 2020. The art of kimono reveals how clothing, which is regarded as a social skin, is a means of understanding class, power, economy, and art. Will kimonos someday become remnants of the past, and most of them are trapped in museums? On the question, Masumoto said, "Many kinds of clothing marked as great traditional Japanese textiles are rapidly losing popularity. Even so, the creativity in Japanese textile design are excellent and continue to influence new and innovative textile industries."